Now there we are. I'm calling this 4.1, but it's still the CBD in the 40s. So I've got finished there at the end of Alfred Street on the eastern side. I now return to the railway station and I'm making my way down Will Street, and I cross over the road from the railway station and I come to the Telegraph. No. Oh, look, I always get confused at this point. It's not Telegraph and it's not it's the Railway Hotel, better known as the Rocks. Okay. Now, I still haven't solved all the problems for me anyway, about the Rocks as yet, because I'm not quite sure whether it began its life called the Railway Hotel. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. But I can't find any evidence in the newspapers relating to the beginning of the Railway Hotel. Now, the Railway Hotel could only have become the Railway Hotel, it could only have been worthwhile building after the advent of the railway in 1889. So I assume that the Railway Hotel began shortly after that. If you had a railway station in any town, you always had a Railway Hotel. But whether it began it being called the Railway Hotel, I'm not quite sure, because I can't find it listed in the advertisements of the period. And I'm following the line of, was it in fact also called the Union Hotel? Because during the 1891 strike, there were some scabs, supposed to be coming in on the train. And so there was a march through the Will Street, and the Unionists left Will Street and made their way to the Union Hotel, where they awaited the train to heckle and boo and groan. They usually groaned at the military, and I think they heckled and generally carried on and said unkind things in French or any other language to the scabs. And so that made me wonder whether that hotel may have begun by being called the Union Hotel, but of that I'm not sure, and I will continue, while there's life in me, of course, to pursue that matter. I think I'd come across the Union Hotel before, and I had wondered whether the Dalton, previously the Royal, may have been the Union. I'm sure. And if someone may be able to keep me up to date on that one, because I'm really a bit confused about that. But anyway, in the 40s, you'd pass the Rocks Hotel. Now, who patronised the Rocks Hotel? I really do not know. I'd hear people going up to the Rocks. And I was always a bit mystified by the Rocks. If they'd said the Railway Hotel, I would have known it, but the Rocks was another matter altogether. Anyway, you'd go down that street, and down that street on the southern side down to Paris Street, there were just some houses, nothing much. You'd cross over the road, and you would come to the school block. Now, I deal with the school in other of my grand productions, but in between the school, near Paris Street, and A1 Rubber Agency was a fountain. The fountain was put there after the war in memory of a British airman who was killed in a crash. I can't remember the year, but I can remember the crash because I was still in bed. Maybe in school holiday time, because I thought it was a little bit later, And I had this great boom, and we heard later on a plane had crashed, and this young airman had been killed. And after the war, the Duke of Gloucester was, and I'm sure I speak accurately, was required to come to Charleville to carry out a regal or vice-regal duty. I wonder, was that old rogue the Governor-General or something? Maybe he was, I don't know. Because I don't think he would otherwise have willingly have come to Charleville. But anyway, he came to Charleville. And his job was to, or maybe it was a royal visit. I do not know. The only thing I know is the old swine was in Charleville. And he would have been staying at Cronies, that's for sure. He was to open the fountain. Now that fountain, of course, is down there near the RSL Hall now. I don't know whether it's connected to the water or not. And over the road from Toddy Connolly's house. Anyway, he was supposed to open the fountain, and Mrs. Kirk, old Borley Kirk's the principal's wife. Oh, she brought us down. We were all the little ones, you know. We must have been, well, how little were we? We were 45, I would have been 7, 8, something like that. Wouldn't have been 45, might have been 46, 47, but I'm getting on a bit, you know, at that stage. But Mrs. Kirk brought us down for the grand ceremony. Oh, there was going to be the opening and the grand ceremony by the King's brother, or whatever. Anyway, she gave us flags. We had Australian flags, we had Union Jack flags, mainly Union Jack flags, and we were going to wave them. I don't know what we thought was going to happen, but whatever it was going to be regal. Well, we saw the vice-regal car approaching, and we were getting ready. We were ready to wave and, you know, say patriotic things or whatever. I don't really know. Mrs. Kirk hadn't trained us, you know, in any particular song for the occasion. We were there visually. Our main job was to give colour and movement, you see. Anyway, the old bastard was drunk, pissed as a fart, as they say. He stumbled out of his car, he pulled the flag off the fountain and drove off. Well, I don't know whether we'd even got through 2 waves before he'd gone. Pierpont, you know, the English executioner. Well, he used to dispatch people in very short time, I'm told. He'd leave his cigar burning, and the ash had not fallen off by the time he got back from doing his job. That's how speedy he was. Well, I can tell you what, the Duke of Gloucester beat even that. His cigar would hardly have been lit by the time he had finished the job. Gee, I tell you. Anyway, we were very disappointed. Okay, you keep on going down and then you get to the corner of the school, diagonally opposite the Catholic church, where we used to sit, of course. And when those Catholic kids would go past, we'd say, "Conran slobs sitting on logs, eating bellies out of frogs." We thought this was a big takedown. They were expected to shrivel before us. But they knew the correct riposte. States with the dirty old dates, they would say. Well, I'm not often caught for words, but I was always caught for words then. What could you say in reply? States with the dirty old dates. You could prove them wrong, I suppose, but we were never so inclined to do. Over the road we go, because what's that now by this time? We're up to Watson Street. There was a shop there that during the 40s was empty most of the time. I think it belonged to Charleville Motors. I think they eventually turned it into a sort of white goods shop or something like that. But in the 40s, for the most part, it was empty as far as I recall. Then a couple of houses, very prudently raised on very high stilts. Your floods, you know. Then came the other side of the bridge. Then Gertie Steers School of Arts pub. Okay. Now, Gertie Steers School of Arts pub was opposite the School of Arts. That's why it was called the School of Arts pub. Where the town hall is used to be the School of Arts. The School of Arts. This was in the period of the 1890s and so on, where people were being encouraged for self-education and so on, self-improvement. And the schools of arts provided reading rooms and opportunities for some sort of learning and advancement of people who'd had no great deal of formal education. And so that was built where the town hall is now. And strangely enough, the pictures I've seen of the School of Arts are very similar to the design of the town hall. It was almost as if one had been modelled on the other. But the School of Arts Hotel at that stage in the 40s was run by a woman called Gertie Steer. But it had been run either by Mr. Dalton or Mrs. Dalton. One of the very early settlers in Charleville was a fellow called Pierce Dalton. He was certainly there in 1867 because he bought one of those allotments in Section 1, either allotment 2 or allotment 3 in Section 1. But that was in 1867. So that Dalton family had been around there for a long time, and their daughter, of course, was none other than Miss Lucinda Dalton, who was constantly being written about because whenever there was a concert on in town, Miss Lucinda Dalton, she sang, she danced, she said poetry. Oh, she was apparently a great entertainer. She was a great darling of town. But anyway, they had the School of Arts Hotel or one of them anyway, husband or wife, ran the School of Arts Hotel at one stage. And but by 1945, Now, wait a minute, I got to school in 1943. So in 1943 and 1944, I must have walked by the corner there. Now, I would have walked by the corner there very deliberately, because I do recall seeing some American soldiers there, American airmen, I'm not quite sure. They used to stay, you know, down beyond the hospital. And but occasionally they must have appeared in town sometimes. Well, they had to appear in town sometimes because they won the hearts of a number of young girls in town. They also won the hearts of not so young girls. Of them, maybe I can tell you that story at some stage. You know, with the names obliterated. But I speak truth, you know. And but anyway, the story about the American airmen was that if you got to know an American airman, you could be gifted one of two things. You could either be given nylon stockings, and that's what I think attracted the girls particularly, these nylon stockings. But I was interested in the other thing, and that was, it was said that if you became known to an American airman, he may give you PKs. Well, you couldn't get PKs during the war. They were things that turned up after the war. But anyway, I sort of, you know, sashayed past. I must have been, what, 5, 6? As, you know, I mean, a 5 or 6 year old would sashay. And, but anyway, I had no luck. I got no PKs. I crossed over the road, of course, past the town hall. Town hall had 2 shops for a long time. The first one, I think, was an accountancy firm, maybe an union trustees, but I couldn't be sure of it. Then on the opposite side, the first one I can remember was a dentist, a Mr. Latcham, or Latcham or Latchman. I'm not quite sure about that one. Latcham or Latchman, Laurie Latchman, I think, because Laurie Latchman was in our class. But it was, people said in town that he was an amateur dentist. He wasn't really licensed. So we never went to him. Maybe that's why we went to old, what's his name, Jim Carey. Oh, dirty old bastard. But anyway, after Mr. Latchman left, a barber came in, a man called Mr. Michael. And we went there a few times, you know. I don't know how, because my father, being a shearer, insisted upon shearing us. Oh, a cruel business. He used to have these hand clippers with broken teeth. We'd say, "You're pinching." Because we'd be sitting on an apple case with a sheet or towel around us, you know. And he'd shave us up to here. See where is this point here, where hair becomes a little bit sparse? Well, he would shave us up to here, there, just there. Well, not shave with these bloody clippers. "You're pinching." He would object. He would know when he was pinching, he said. Of course, he didn't know. But anyway, we used to go to Mr. Michael sometimes. I don't know how. I don't know. Maybe in a marital dispute or something. I don't really know. But so we would go there. But the grand occasion that I remember, you know, was I looked in one day, and who should be in Mr. Michael's barber shop? None other than Borley Kirk. Borley Kirk, the headmaster of the school. Now, Borley didn't have a hair on his head. Look at me. You know, I'm like some African fuzz by comparison. Well, Borley was there having a singe. Well, it was said that he had a singe, so immediately I saw him in there. I knew he had to be having a singe, because everyone in town knew that he would go in there for a singe. Well, this was not something that was frequently seen. You know, this was like Fatima, an apparition, or maybe Halley's Comet. I don't know. Certainly something very rare. Well, I looked in and here was Borley. What was I to do? I ran up and down Will Street, letting any child know who went to school that old Borley was having a singe in the barber shop. So parties wandered, not into, but up and down past the... And old Borley, of course, maybe old Borley could see us in the mirror, I don't know. But he didn't rise up or anything. But this was one of the great events of that barber shop. Then after that, the barber shop, I don't know what happened to it. Then you'd come to the yard leading into the town hall grounds. That's where you used to have the fetes. All those fetes were good, and I'll guarantee that the convent school ran them, because there was all sorts of gambling went on there. You'd have the bingo. Bingo was absolutely great. I think Argus Swat and Company used to run that, but Argus Swat used to run, it was like a chocolate wheel, and they'd spin the wheel, and it had some colours on it or something. Maybe many colours, red, white and blue anyway. And then there was a board, and you'd put money on red, white or blue. So, and he would call out 2 to 1 the red and white, 3 to 1 the blue, 2 to 1 the red and white, 3 to 1 the blue. Well, I mean, God, I was a mere infant. But along I'd go and I'd put my money, of course I never made any, but nevertheless it was fair, it wasn't rigged. That, all of those things used to go on in the, in the fetes in the town hall. Of course, you know, the Catholic fetes sometimes were in the convent grounds. I told you about that old, what was his name, Carlyle, I think his name was. His son told me that don't go to a Catholic fete, because if you go to the Catholic fete and you buy, so you get a glass of cordial, you know, because there was more profit in the cordial, I think. But don't go and buy cordial at the convent fete, because they give you dishwater. Well, I went to a Catholic fete at one stage. I went to the convent fete, and they didn't give me dishwater, I can tell you. Maybe it was because I'd spoken kindly of the church. I really do not know. Maybe they knew I had secret sympathies. But nevertheless, that's what they said. Oh, terrible tongues people had. Anyway, then you pass the War Memorial. Now, the War Memorial, the gates are always locked, and you can never get inside except on the 25th of April each year. And I thought this was something magical, something mysterious, you see. Oh, you know, we were locked out, and it was only opened, the gates were only opened on the 25th of April each year. It was almost religious, you know. Anyway, then there was the block of shops going right down to the corner to Galatea Street. The first shop was empty for a few years, but then it was decided after the war that it was a good thing to sell fruit to those deprived Westerners. And a committee of direction of fruit marketing was formed that became known as the COD. This must have been in about, what's that? That'd be 45, 46. Now 47, 48, 49. Oh, no. It had to be about 1947. Yeah, 47. It probably came there in 47, because the COD had a float in the centenary procession in the shape of a map of Australia, with each state depicted or coloured in fruit. Green apples, oranges, red apples and so on. Each state had its particular coloured fruit. And COD was there, and so that was the first manifestation. That eventually closed down, and it became at some stage, or may have been just before that. No, maybe been just after that, I can't remember. It became the Commonwealth Employment Service. Then I don't know what happened after that. But last time I was in Charleville, I discovered that it was now sort of part of the prison service. And if you're in Charleville, on parole, touring, or whatever it is you do on parole, you have to report once a week. And Charleville is it's a town of the heart. Which side of my heart? Yeah, that's my heart. Okay, Charleville is a town of the heart, because that particular shop, if you're on parole and you're in a wheelchair, that shop has wheelchair and disabled access. One of the very few shops and government organisations in town that has that. You moved on then to Wiggins. Wiggins was a sort of a, I don't know, they sold whatever you call them, haberdashery or something? I don't know, I must look, I'm a bit out of touch with these terms. But anyway, you could buy materially things, you know, shirts, maybe other shirts, dresses, whatever. Anyway, that was Les Wiggin. He was a nice fellow, we liked him. Okay, then a small shop. Then I think he came to the wonderful Bellevue Cafe. Oh, it was a wonderful place. Very sophisticated, I can tell you. You could buy malted milks. You could buy, let me think, sandwiches, toasted or plain. You could get a salad, you know, a little bit of ham and lettuce and all that sort of thing in it. And the other thing I remember, you could buy Rocky Road chocolate. My mother used to go in there occasionally and buy 2 bobs worth of Rocky Road chocolate. Now, 2 bobs worth of Rocky Road chocolate in those days gave you something the size of a florin, you know, about that big. And my mother would give us a peck each of this Rocky Road chocolate. But 2 bob didn't really give you, but that must have been an occasion of wild extravagance on my mother's part. But we would go there occasionally because we would buy lunch. She'd give us a shilling. And for a shilling you could get a malted milk, you know, in those metal containers. And then they had those wonderful glass-shaped things that sometimes, but we didn't care about having the glass thing to drink out of with a straw. We were quite happy to suck out of a straw in that big metal container. But my mother had a rule, and the rule was this, that when you go into any of those shops and they give you a drink, they give you a straw, always break the straw to prevent it from being used again. Because, you know, these days you can go into Woolworths and buy 1,000 straws, but not in those days. They were articles almost of sophistication. And so, yes, you broke the straw because, God, you didn't want cholera or whatever you get. And so, yes, even in Bellevue, we broke the straw. I can tell. But it was quite a nice place. Then you came to the wonderful Pall Mall. Ladies section down one end, some sort of miscellaneous sections in the middle, I'm not sure. And then down the other end you had the gentlemen's section. Now, the 2 people down the ladies' end were Gladys Cook and Mrs. Häusler. Now, Gladys Cook, very approachable. And if you had any intimate matter, any intimate thing that you wanted to buy, and my mother did occasionally have intimate things she wanted to buy, but being pregnant often, she put herself in purdah for the period. And when she'd want some intimate thing, I would be sent and I'd have to ask Gladys Cook, "Can I see Gladys Cook, please?" Gladys would inquire, but Gladys would know that the Bilbys wanted something intimate. "What do you want?" she'd say. "Mum wants to know, can she get a size 8 bra?" Well, a size 8 bra. I don't know whether she was embarrassed by needing the bra or the size. You know, she made me feel as if she was a Jersey cow or something. Size 8 bra. Anyway, but there we are. And then Mrs. Häusler, lovely woman, wife of very close to the teacher. But we didn't go to her for the intimate things. Okay, then you go across the other side of the shop, and there was a Claude Cook, very approachable cook. We liked Claude Cook, very, very good. And he had 2 assistants there. One was called Rue Ferguson, and the other one was called Rex Sullivan, I think. Or was it Rex? No, I think it might have been Rex Sullivan. But because there was no Sullivan family there, but I think he may have been Rex Sullivan. We liked them. They were young, and they were from our end of town, and therefore to be trusted. They lived down there near Parish Street in the football field. Both of them. Quite close to one another. But they were good. They may have worked there for a very long time. But we liked the Pall Mall very much. Now, we didn't have a lot of money to spend, I can tell you, because Mother would take us there once a year to buy what was, in fact, a very cheap, and I can tell you, not very warming jumper or cardigan or something like that, which the sleeves were always worn out from the desks at school. And we may be lucky, and she'd buy what was known as a fleecy lined singlet. And that was, in Charleville winters, that was our warmth of winter. God, I tell you about all these years I spent in China, and I can tell you what, the Chinese never knew the cold that we knew. In that fleecy lined singlet and that cheap sweater and a short sleeve shirt of light cotton weave or something. Oh, ours was a deprived time, I can tell you. Anyway, that was that. We liked that shop very, very much. Pall Mall was a great, great shop. Cross over the road, and there was a shop. I think it began in my memory as one of these, estate agents. But it did become, for a time, a butcher shop. Now, whether it was a butcher shop that was really Dignan's, migrated from Alfred Street to there or not, I don't know. But it had the flavour of a sort of a delicatessen almost. I do remember going there and ordering a 2 bob roast once. And and getting all good, you know, you'd get a good look at that. Look, the roast would be like that for 2 bob. And I don't exaggerate at all. Okay, then beside that was Borewater Barnes. Borewater Barnes was it was a little pokey sort of pharmacy, but it had big bowls of coloured water. There was purple water, maybe blue water, maybe water, I really don't know. But it added a certain pharmaceutical aura to the shop. Now, Borewater Barnes, you used him as your doctor because Lower King Street didn't go much to the doctors. They weren't big on doctors, that's for sure. And the things they said about Dr. Fox, I can tell you. Oh my God, people say. That's down our end of town. Well, of course it would have borne no truth, whatever it was. The scandalous things they said. Oh dear, terrible. I didn't believe a word of it, I can tell you, nor did any of the Bilbys, that's for sure. Okay then. So, now you'd say, oh, Mr. Fox. No, not Mr. Fox. Mr. Barnes, could we get some black eye drops, please? Because conjunctivitis or something is fairly common. And you'd get black eye drops. And, well, you know, if you wanted to be a little bit, you know, on the edge, you'd ask for something for diarrhea. But you wouldn't go there for, well, I don't think you would go there for personal items, shall we say. I know my mother used to go there for Dexedrine. She was addicted, I'm sure, to Dexedrine, as were half the women of town, because it was said that if you took Dexedrine, you wouldn't get fat or you'd lose weight or it made you think you were full or something. But I know she would go there for the Dexedrine, and I think quite a lot of the other ladies did also. Next to that was Tate's News Agency, run in later years by Mr. Martin, who used to do the bookings for the picture show. And, you know, if you were among the gentry of town, you didn't just go to the pictures as we did. You booked. And you paid threepence or something to book. And if you wanted to pay a little bit more and you wanted to be really sophisticated, you booked for upstairs. Oh, God, upstairs. It was almost like royalty, you know, if you went upstairs. I don't know whether I ever actually went upstairs, but if I did, boy, I would have thought I was Jackie, and I would have thought that I was among the elite of town, that's for sure. No, we were sort of downstairs. Okay, then there was a little laneway, and the bank manager at the time, they used to grow freesias in there. Now, freesias in Charleville are a pretty rare thing, but I used to walk past there in early spring, and you'd smell these freesias. Oh, I thought it was absolutely wonderful. Almost as wonderful as walking into the Catholic Church, you know. Okay, then there was the Bank of New South Wales. Then there was a bit of tin for a few metres. Then it began at the Dalton Hotel. Now, the Dalton was not, I don't know that our family frequented the Dalton, but the first shop was certainly a saddler's. You could smell it. Oh, it was very lovely. Then I think there may have been the saddlers, you could buy everything. You could buy saddles, bridles, blinkers, I suppose, maybe hobbles. I don't really know. But anyway, it was all there. Oh, the smell was very lovely. But the Charleville Times, when the Dalton burned down, made no mention of it. But it was certainly there, because I remember that one. If I'm sure about any shop in that Dalton complex, it was that first shop, and it was the saddlers. Then I think there may have been a barber, but I'm not sure about that. Then you'd come to the main entrance of the Dalton. You'd walk inside. Well, that's those who did walk inside. This was not into the bar. This was sort of into the accommodation area. And I was very, very impressed. I crept in one day, just as I crept into the Catholic Church. But it didn't have the same overwhelming impression upon me as the Catholic Church did. But there was this grand stairway. Oh, look, it was like the Paris Opera House. It was like the Staatsopera in Vienna. Oh, this grand escalier going up to the second level. And at the foot of it, on an easel, was sort of, I may have been in pastel oils, I don't really know, was a portrait of Miss Lucinda Dalton. So they all was very lovely. Probably went up in the flames, you know. You'd move on from there to the bar section, and it too had swinging doors. Okay, then, and then if you went round the corner, you headed off then down towards the Telegraph Hotel. And when it burnt down, there was Sims's second-hand shop, and Hubert Marshall, the bootmaker. Now, I remember Hubert Marshall, or I think I remember Hubert Marshall, in a shop just behind A1 Rubber Agency, and he may have moved there after the Dalton burnt down. That also became that little shop, you know, there behind the A1 Agency. That used to be a woolen or sheep skin buyer. These hoggets my father used to get sometimes had a brand on them. And we would be sent up to sell the skin. And the buyer would say, "What's this mark on here?" We would deny all. We would be mystified by it. But it was a brand. And whoever owned a B brand, you were the ones who lost the sheep. If you wondered where your sheep went, that's where it went. Okay, so then over the road from there, of course, you had the post office. And then beside that, the Grand Commonwealth Bank, established 1938. Then the police station with gauze along it, which I don't know that we had much, I don't know where I actually got to the police station, but I thought that greenish sort of gauze that was along the front of the police station gave it a fairly austere appearance. It wasn't welcoming. I thought if the police wanted to reach out to the people of Charleville, they needed to be more welcoming, and that gauze really didn't invite. But anyway, over the road we go, because we're now going up the western side of Alfred Street. On the corner, National Bank. Okay, then I think may have been Fitzwalter's would have been the store after that, or it may have been one of these Winchcombe Castle or something, and then may have been Fitzwalter's. I can't remember. We didn't have anything to do with them because they were the Tories. And you wished them ill, that's for sure. Okay, but then you came to Fitzwalter's. Now, we didn't have much to do with Fitzwalter's either. Our loyalties lay elsewhere, although my Aunt Mary, my grandfather's sister, tells me that my great-grandmother and Mrs. Fitzwalter were good friends, and they used to go out in a buggy together. If you think of some of the parks of Paris and the ladies in their traps being taken, well, that's what it was like in Charleville sometimes with old Mrs. Bilby and old Mrs. Fitzwalter, you see. Oh, very sophisticated. And in the early days, the footpath and the road, they had the footpath there, and then there was a bit of a gutter. But at one stage, my grandfather's sister, Lizzie, that's Lizzie Akers, and I won't say too much because Lizzie Bilby married Tom Akers, okay? But Lizzie was all done up in the fashions of the early 1900s, and she was doing whatever you did in the 1900s to look sophisticated. Well, she went arse over tit in the gutter. And there she was with this long dress down to her ankles, probably a bustle and a train maybe even. Well, she was like a dead cockroach. She had to be assisted up. She had no face, I can tell you. But anyway, if you go into Fitzwalter's, I can't even remember too much of that. I think it was sort of a miscellaneous shop, I think. May have been groceries down there. I know in the middle there was miscellaneous, because in the 1940s there was a woman called Molly Lemon being married, and for some reason or another we were invited to Molly Lemon's wedding. And a group gift had to be bought. So for some reason or another, the group, which included my mother and an aunt, not of the blood, went in to buy Molly Lemon a gift. Well, there was much, should they get this, should they give that, should they give something else? They finally opted as a group gift for Molly Lemon a wooden rolling pin. I tell you. It was not a royal wedding, and they were not royal gifts, that's for sure. But the interesting thing about the Fitzwalters was that they had this overhead money system. It was, I don't know, like a monetary funicular or something like that. You'd buy something, and then your money and the docket would be put in a little cylinder, and it would be attached to a wire, overhead wire, and they'd pull the lever or whatever, pull like, cord. And the cylinder would go speeding along the wire, and I think a Miss Carr was in an upstairs office. She would receive it. She'd put the change back in the cylinder, pull the thing again, and back it would come to you. Now, I think it was supposed to be very modern or something, I don't know, but it just seemed rather curious to me. I prefer just to give cash, get cash, and don't muck around down at Pall Mall or in any other shop in town. But that's, of course, what you could do in Fitzwalters. Now, you keep on going, miscellaneous shops. You'd come eventually to the end there. The last shop was the Charleville Times. Then after that, if you kept on walking, yes, then you'd come to, now in front there would have been the skating rink, that's right. And then behind the skating rink there was the swimming pool. And then beside the skating rink there was the croquet club, which had migrated from the corner of King and Wool Street. Okay. Now the swimming pool, of course, was a 25 metre pool. It always seemed to me it had a lot of galvanised iron around it, galvanised dressing sheds, dirty big plug down one end that you wouldn't want to be caught in when they were letting the water out. And they'd let this chlorinated water out into the river, mind you. I think it probably flowed into that sort of Annabranch, that billabong there, before the main part of the river. So maybe the fish was spared. But whether you can catch any fish, or could at that point catch any fish around there, I really don't know. Just as all of the fish in the gully, the crayfish in the gully were killed when they used to let the water out of that pool they built at King Edward Park, all that chlorinated water going into the gully, and all the crustaceans that we used to get when we were kids, that was the end of them, I can tell you. Okay then. So that was the swimming pool, and then in front of the swimming pool there was the skating rink. I think that had some cracks in it, but I think it was fairly popular. You know, these wheels, they had wheels in front, wheels behind, and around they'd go. I always assumed the Hoons would go there, but whether the Hoons only went there or not, I don't know. But I have no doubt the Hoons played up there from time to time. But it was a pretty popular place. And then beside that, of course, was the croquet club. But that was the site of the original, that was the very first building in Charleville. The site of the very first building in Charleville. There was a hotel built there, so I believe. And as I believe from the records, there was a hotel built there in 1864. Yes, would have been at least 1864. Described in the literature that I know as the Caravanserai. It then became, for a little time, known as the Charleville Hotel. Not the Charleville Hotel that we know. Then became Cooper's Hotel. Then it was taken over by the Janetskis. Eventually it became the Victoria Hotel. And it came to at the end of its life in 1916 with the fire. And so it remained vacant for a few years. That's allotment 6 in that block. It was vacant for a few years. And that's when after that they put in the pool, the skating rink and the croquet club. Then you came to Hull's Hotel. Now that's used to be known as the New Victoria, because when the original Victoria was burnt down, the lady who owned it, no longer the Janetskis, simply rebuilt it on the block next door. That's allotment 7. The only thing about it was that there's only one story I know about that one, and that was this. One of the teachers from the school used to stay there. Oh, nice fellow, really nice fellow. Tall man, lean, not a bit of fat on him. Well known in football circles, known well to my father. Used to teach us in grade 3. No, I just said once grade 4, but it wasn't. That was Henry Schonheimer. Mr. Jack Walsh taught us in grade 3. Oh, lovely man, we liked him very much. But a story went round the school one morning, you know. Stories always went round the school very early. By the time I got to school, the story had been around, and oh dear. Anyway, the story said that Jack Walsh had urinated from the balcony of Hull's Hotel into Wool Street. I doubted this. The story is a good one, and it was worth telling and was retold often. But I thought it cannot be true, because there was a physical impediment, because on that balcony they used to have those slat blinds. Well, maybe Jack could manage to squeeze through somehow or another, but how could he be recognised? That's what I'd like to know. I don't really believe that story. I think it was untrue. Why would he need to do that? It was a modern hotel. He was upstairs, maybe in summer. He may have been sleeping on the veranda. Maybe the WC was occupied. I don't really know. But those slat blinds tell me that neither could you have known who did the deed, if indeed it was done, because they were behind those green slat blinds that were battered to hell by the hail of 1947. So I don't believe that story, but that's the story they told. Oh, people will tell in Charleville any story, you know. They're wicked tongues, you know, wicked tongues. Okay, well then after that there are a couple of sort of residential allotments. Well, I think Mr. Falkenmeyer might have actually lived. Then you'd come to Burke Street. Then you'd cross over Burke Street and you'd come to the power station. Okay. Well, my uncle used to work there, you know. Tom, my grandfather's brother. We went in once, you know, wanted to have a look at it. The machines weren't working very well because we went through a few years in the 1940s where we had very little power, I can tell you. And ladies had to use pots as irons to iron. Or sometimes we had to go to school with clothes that weren't ironed because there was no power. Oh, I tell you what, the times were cook until that new power station came. But anyway, we went in there one day and my uncle Tom gave us some mercury that's inside, you know, if you have the electric meter, and there's mercury in them apparently, and he gave us a little bit of mercury. Now, we had been told at school, wait a minute, I wonder, do I need lighting a bit more? Oh, I don't know, that impressed me. Well, I adjust the lighting. I don't want to appear dark. Oh, I don't know, I think I look better that way. What do you think? Yeah, I'll do with this, I think. Okay, anyway, now we've been doing, now, even in those days, you know, we did science at school. Not much. But we were told that if you had mercury and you put some mercury into a duck's mouth, boom, it went through the duct just like that. Mercury in, and instantly out through the duck's bum, mercury out. Well, I believed it, and I believe that's what we were taught. But we didn't try, because I mean, catch a duck. We didn't have a duck. But I think if we'd had a duck, we might have tried that. But certainly that was the story. You put mercury in the mouth of the duck, it'll come out the duck's bum just like that. Just go straight through it. Of course, we didn't learn any anatomy at school. I don't know what the science was. I don't think it was anatomy, and certainly not duck's anatomy. Okay, well then you move on a little bit further, a couple of houses. Then you come to really interesting places. Okay, now the really interesting places are these. There's a lane, and beside that lane there's a building that contained Binny's hardware shop, and then there may have been another miscellaneous shop or so, and then the offices of 4VL, but their office was upstairs. But it was Binny's hardware. Now Binny's used to double as hardware and undertaker, and they had a very, very modern hearse that for most of the week was a vehicle used for the hardware store. And so it had sort of long, elongated panels on each side. And during the week when it was being used for hardware, they used to slide in panels that said Binny's Hardware. And then when someone passed on, they'd remove those panels out, probably put some sort of sliders in there or something, and it would become a very modern, wait a minute, somewhere here, here we are. Now look, how sophisticated can you be? If you think I've got sophistication, you're about to be disabused of, look. By God, that's sophistication for you. Okay then. Well now, when Mr. Binny would put those in, oh, that hearse, you'd have gladly gone to the cemetery in that very modern look. Oh, it was so slick. Oh, I would have rested in peace with a big grin on my face, I can tell you. However, somewhere there, I don't know where, but I assumed in that shed down the back, Mr. Binny must have had a viewing room because the coffins had to be kept somewhere. They certainly weren't kept in that hardware store, and they must have been down the back there somewhere. Now, whether he had a range of coffins, I do not know, or whether there was one size fits all or one design fits all, I don't. But they would have been good solid wood, that's for sure. But anyway, Mr. Binny gave me a terrible shock one day. Oh, look, I nearly passed out. I knew that his vehicle was a dual hearse hardware vehicle. One day I saw it in its hardware guise. The hearse that came along the street, Binny's Hardware. And I looked and I thought, oh, that's very nice. Knowing, of course, that it also had a dual purpose. But unfortunately, the back door was open. And sticking out the back door was what I thought was a human foot. Something came out like that, then went up. My God, I thought Mr. Binny's made a terrible mistake here. He's got a body in the back of that vehicle, and the foot is sticking out. Well, I was absolutely scandalised and terrified. I stood transfixed. Fortunately, closer examination proved it to be a drain pipe, like that. But I had thought it was foot. Look, I tell you what, I nearly passed on, and I would have blamed Binny for that. And they would have got the business out of it too, mind you. But anyway, on we go. So we leave Binny's behind, and then we move on, and then we come to the cattle camp. Yes. The cattle camp, I quite like that name. But you know, the Revette, I think they named it after some old nag of some kind. I didn't really like that name, Revette. But my brother-in-law, you know, Billy Curley, good man. Billy used to drive around there, you know, for a beer. He lived in Burke Street. I don't know, he could have walked there in about a minute, but he used to drive around. And, Billy was well known there, he was a fine fellow. Of course, you know, the cops got him once. He drove back. The cops waited until he drove into his yard. They'd been following him, you know, like in a cortege almost. When he got out of the car, they said, "Hey, you've been driving under the influence of alcohol." Well, I'm sure that Billy contested this, but they must have made him puff on those things. Well, he went to court. Well, he was lucky because he was forgiven. Or, if not forgiven, he was certainly pardoned, because it was said he'd made a grand contribution to the town, and this was just a momentary lapse. And so nothing too untoward came of it. Although, you know, and now I can tell you this because there are many saints I've met in my life. My sister was a saint, you know, Janice, a saint. Billy, certainly a saint. And they were made for one another. They're one of the best marriages that I know. But, you know, every now and then Billy would offend Janice, of course. Apparently he offended her one day. She'd cooked dinner and he was home late, or he wasn't home. Dinner was ready. He was imbibing. It's said, now this is a story that's told within the family, do not repeat it outside the family or outside the confines of Charleville, that's for sure. It's said that he was sitting in the Revette, the cattle camp, imbibing, when suddenly a fist came through the window. He must have been near a window. Fist came, boom. Yeah, no, not a boom, not like that. Accompanied by an instruction, get home. Billy put down the glass and returned home very quickly. My sister was offended, but she was a woman of action. And she had the Bilby gene, because the Bilbys are given to a bit of action from time to time. And they don't mind a fight. Well, in those days they didn't mind a fight. I mean, you know, we modern ones, we'd run quickly. Or we'd call the cops for assistance. But not in those days. Dukes up and you get your coat off. Of course, you know, when Billy was on the council, on one occasion at least, in some altercation over a matter of principle, he invited one of the other councillors to get your coat off and come outside, and we'll settle this in the backyard. So it is said. Okay then. So there we are. So, you know, there we are. That takes us right down to the end of Alfred Street. Now, I wonder if I covered everything there. Now, I haven't quite covered it. What I might do is go back, and I'll go down Edward Street. There was because at the end of Edward Street, you see, there was, wait a minute, did I tell you about the goings-on at the School of Arts? Yes, maybe there was a lady there. She ran a business. a queue. No, I better not say any more because I'm maybe attacked by various people. I wouldn't want that. Okay then. Well, we'll pass on. We'll leave the school of arts there. We'll move on down now. We've got there's a picture show. That picture show was wonderful, you know. I've described the picture show in others, I think, but I love that picture. It was a wonderful, wonderful building. And why they knocked it down, I'll never know. It had its own noisy child crying room. What other picture theatre in all of Australia has a crying room for babies for the comfort of the rest of the year? Oh, it was a wonderful show. And warm in winter and cool in summer. Oh, God. We would go to the pictures in winter and we'd we'd be so comfortable in the warmth of the theatre. And then about 11 o'clock we'd have to go home and walk all the way down to Lower King Street. And the temperature was probably about -5 or 6. And our ears would be burning, but we loved that picture show. Over the road was Argus Watts. Oh, no, there was Charleville Motors. They used to be the agents for the picture show at one stage. I don't know whether it was the new picture show or it was their agents for the open air one, or both. I don't really know. Then there was a timber yard. Was that A.S. Dawkins or one of the others? But there's certainly a timber yard. Then they came to Rolly Forbes's pie shop. Well, a cafe. I love a wonderful cafe. Shilling, same thing. 6 for one of Rolly Forbes's pies. Did I say Rolly Forbes? I hope I said Rolly Forbes. It was certainly Rolly Forbes. 6 best. No. Rolly Forbes was the later one. The early one was Argus Watt. Argus Watt used to make those wonderful pies. Then I think Rolly Forbes followed. Okay, but Argus Watt was the early one. 6 for a pie and 6 for malted milk. Oh, what a lunch that one was. Very wonderful. Then down from the picture show, over the road on that side, next door to the picture show was McGaw's. McGaw's were the pioneers of air conditioning in Charleville. And that house was air conditioned from a very early age. And I think they probably were responsible for the air conditioning of the picture show. And I think their house was called Wee Wah or something like that. I know it used to, I thought it was very strange. Their house was given a name. It was in a frame. It was on the front veranda. And it was called something like Wee Wah, Wee Wah, something like that. I don't really know. It seemed very sophisticated to me. Then there was this little cafe there, run at that stage by Peter Sams. And I spoke to him elsewhere because we went there on the day the war finished. We could have anything we wanted. And what did we take because of my mother's bad advice? Nothing more than a threepenny pig's trotter. Oh, look, I still curse myself. The war's ended. You could have what you want. Festival, fete, everything. And I took a threepenny pig's trotter. Oh, dear. If you go down to the corner, of course, there's the ambulance. And of course, you could use them as a doctor a little bit too, you know, sometimes. Particularly if you sort of had an accident on your bike and skinned your ankle or skinned your knee or something. You go to the ambulance and say, oh, you had a boil. Oh, yeah, they were very good for boils. But boils are a bit more common in those. But if you go over the road from there, there has been, and for many years, a very attractive cottage there. You know, lead lighting and all that. Well, it seemed to be lead lighting and so on. But that house that's there now is a replacement for the house that had been there. And there's a story connected with that house. Now, I can't tell you that story now, but it's another one of Charleville's fires under mysterious circumstances. Oh, if you go back to Harriman's, they had 2 fires, remember, because there was a Common Co garage fire. But then in later years, there was another fire. Harriman's had gone, and I think there was a produce agency there, if I remember rightly. And that burnt down, some said under mysterious circumstances. But oh dear, I remember going out to Charleville one time, you know, and one of the hotels had just burnt down. I won't say which one, but I was staying at a motel. I said, good God, the hotel is gone. I can see old burnt iron. Yes, they said. It was burnt down under mysterious circumstances. Do tell, I said, all innocent, as if I didn't come from Charleville and I knew nothing. Do tell, I said. Well, they then told me the mysterious circumstances. Oh, and what a story it was too. But I don't believe a word of it. Okay then. And if you go down that street, God, what's burnt down? The railway burnt down. Let me see, we move on. The school burnt down. Harriman's burnt down, Cobb and Co, the project of that burnt down. Catholic Church burnt down. We move on a bit. We come there, that hasn't burnt down. Over there, Coronis hasn't burnt down. Dalton burnt down. Charleville burnt down several times, I might add. Oh, no. And then those fires in Alfred Street, for God's sake. I think I speak somewhere about the fire brigade and those fires. The fire brigade, often didn't put a lot of fires out. In the later 19th century, they thought it was a good idea to start a fire brigade, but they mainly did, practice for if there was a fire. And eventually they got some equipment, but it wasn't always coordinated. Well, either the hose wasn't long enough, or there was no water pressure, or there was no water outlet, or there was no, there was a fire. Someone could find the hose, but no one could find the fittings. They were locked up somewhere. Oh, dear. Not a lot of fires were put out. Although a lot of fires, it was hoped that they wouldn't. Of course, the reports in the papers, they'd always tell you about the fires, and they'd tell you about the damage, and then automatically they would tell you about the insurance value. And most of the hotels burnt down with really, quite good insurance. And if you like to match that with economic times, the economic circumstances, there seemed to be a bit of a relationship between poor times, good insurance, and fire. Look, I'm sure I'm not long for this world. Okay, but I'll struggle on. Now up the top there, I just think about another fire. If you go up to Burke Street, corner of Burke Street and Alfred Street, there used to be a hotel there called the Metropolitan Hotel. That was run by Miller, Clary Miller? No, Chris Miller, I think. We'll just concentrate on the Miller, because that crossing down there was called Miller's Crossing. Only temporarily. He went on to somewhere else after a few years. It burnt down. But someone came up with the idea of building another hotel there on that same spot, I think. About the turn of the century, they called it the Commercial Hotel. It too went up. But you remember, this was in the middle of the terrible drought. And so the circumstances were fairly, mysterious, I can tell you. Then, every now and then, they'd have an inquest into the fire. Cause of fire, but you wouldn't exactly call it. It wasn't too scientific. There were hearings, evidence was called. People saw this, saw that, thought this, thought that, and so on. But I don't think there was one fire that did in half of Alfred Street at one stage, and they thought it might have been caused by the cat. No, they thought the cat may have knocked over the candle in the window. Well, what for God's sake would they have been doing with a candle lit in the window? And they thought that the cat may have knocked it over, that caused the fire. On another occasion, another one of the really big fires, they thought it may have been caused by mice. And then, of course, the Catholic Church, the story of that one. And I think I tell this story somewhere. This old fellow who'd been at war with the church for a whole lifetime, died, was buried from the church. They took him to the cemetery. When they got to the cemetery, they heard the siren. Lo and behold, the Catholic Church had gone up, and everybody said, the people say he did it. Well, he was in his coffin at the time, but God, he must have had sort of Chinese hungry ghost powers. They can cause a lot of evil, Maybe he had Chinese hungry ghost powers, but the burning of that church was attributed to not the candle knocked over, perhaps by the cat or the mice, but knocked over by that fellow, and as they were putting him down, the church went up. Oh, look, you could write a book on the history of Charleville fires, But there we are. Now, what have I left out? I don't know. This is my repeat, but oh dear, what a mess I've made of it. What treasures have I overlooked? But no doubt they'll come back to me. But anyway, I've still got breath in me, I've still got life in me, and while ever I've got life in me, I intend continuing with stories of life in Charleville in the 40s, because that's the period I know. And what I want is, A million people may not be interested now, but I'm interested in 100 years' time, when people are looking back, what was life 100 years ago? What was life like, at that time? And I want to be able to give a description of the real, fine detail of life for ordinary people, not the elite, the ordinary people at that time. They didn't have to be rich, they may have been poor, they weren't well educated, but how did they live? What shops did they go to? And what stories did they tell about themselves, but most of all, about other people? Okay, there we are.